Okay, I'm here at the Harris Teeter. I wanted to do a video about what I would look for with buying an orchid. It's gonna be easier here than at the Trader Joe's. Now, I would not buy an orchid here just because they're like way too expensive. Basically, you can get an orchid the same size for half the price at Trader Joe's. But I'm gonna use these as an example of what I would look for, okay? So, first things first. You don't want to rely on the blooms to determine the health of the orchid. You want to rely on the leaves. Now, blooms can be an indication of a problem, but blooms that look good doesn't necessarily indicate health. So does that make sense? So like blooms, and I'll show you guys some examples. So if you've got problems with the blooms, there's probably another problem with the plant. But you could have a problem with the plant and the blooms could still look okay. So you want to look first at the leaves and the roots, basically. You want to look for leaves that are perky and not dehydrated. Now, what's tricky is it's harder to tell when they're in these plastic sleeves because you can't tell if the leaves would droop otherwise. But you want to look for a grassy green color, so you don't want like any weird discoloration in the leaves. So let's take a look at this first example here. Now, this is a really good looking orchid, and I'm going to tell you guys why I think that. So looking at the roots, it doesn't look overly saturated. Like, you don't want it to look soggy, but you also don't want it to look dry. And I'm going to show you guys an example of that in a second here too. The leaves look beautiful. You can actually see there's a new leaf coming in there. And when I look at the blooms and the buds, it's actually got a good proportion, because you know how I've told you guys before how like you want to have actually as many buds as possible, because it means there's going to be a lot of longevity. Because when you take this home, you know, you get to enjoy watching these open and then enjoy the blooms for, you know, a long time. So this orchid looks really good. I don't see any mold. I know it's kind of hard to see through the plastic. I don't see any mold. The crown looks really good, because that's another thing you want to look for. And it also has a lot of leaves, which is a good sign. Moving to this one over here. So you will notice, take a look at the leaves here. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 leaves, and it's got a 9th on the way. Compared to this one, has way fewer leaves, and the crown looks a bit on the sickly side, and it's probably hard to tell through the plastic, but it's the best I could do. You can see that there's a couple leaves that are dead there that have come off. Now, that's not the end of the world, because those will shed. The bottom leaves will shed anyway. It doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong, but it can mean there's something wrong if there's a number of them. And we do have quite a few, as well as some dead roots. Could just be dehydrated. However, the roots do look green there. So it makes me wonder if there's a more systemic problem. The crown does not look good. Like, it's really underdeveloped compared to the other orchids. And it doesn't have enough leaves, and the leaves are really small. What this says to me is probably what happened, and it has 3 flower spikes, I think. What probably happened was they overdid it with the fertilizer, and it's put way too much energy into producing flower spikes and blooms versus into its vegetative growth, which is really important for the health of the plant and the life of the plant. So I would not purchase that one. This one looks pretty good. It's not as great as this one. This is a good looking plant right here for all of the reasons. Let's see here. Now this one, now that's a good looking plant as well. Look, it's got a lot of leaves, right? Again, the roots look good. They're that light green. They don't look saturated or soggy. They don't look dried up. I don't see any dead leaves. However, when I look at the blooms, all of the blooms have been opened. There's no buds left, and you can tell that they look like they're already fading. So this just means you wouldn't be able to enjoy it for that long, but you could enjoy it next year because it's a healthy plant. So those are a couple examples there. Now I'm going to show you some orchids I definitely would not buy. Okay, so I'm over here. There's some other orchids over here. Now all of these, I would not buy any of them, and I'll show you guys why. These are all, I think these ones are older, and they're really dehydrated. And again, they're trying to charge $21.99. It's insane. I would take, if they offered me one of these for free to try to save its life, I would take it. I wouldn't pay any money for it. Right off the bat, I just want to point this out because you don't see this very often. On these blooms right here, you can see those specks. That's a disease right there. That's botrytis. That's a disease, and it's contagious to the other orchids. So if you see something like that, you want to not buy an orchid around it, even if that orchid looks healthy, if you can avoid it, right? Again, the plastic sleeves might help prevent some of the spread, but that's a disease. So let's look at this one real quick. So look at the difference here. So if you look at that, that flower spike is dead, and see those buds are all dead. That's what we call bud blast. This orchid is just severely dehydrated. Now, if I wanted to try to save this, I would cut this flower spike, the one that's all messed up. And I might cut both flower spikes, but I would at least cut that one, and I would just put, and I think it could be salvaged. I do think it could be salvaged, but I wouldn't buy it. I'm looking at this one. This is another example. Look, there's the bud blast. So one thing you want to check for, if you see a lot of buds down below on where you see where the potting medium is, I'm trying to see if you guys can see through the glare like that. If you have just one and it looks like maybe it just got hurt in transport, that's one thing. But if you have a lot of them, or they're shriveled up, that's bud blast. Like, that's not a good sign, basically. Doesn't mean the plant can be salvaged, but not what you want if you can help it, especially if you're going to pay for it. And like when you look at these roots, like look at the difference. So all of these are all very dehydrated. You can see all of those aerial roots, they're completely dried up, every single one of them. So these, again, some of these could be salvaged with water. That one with the botrytis, nope, definitely couldn't be salvaged. Oh wow, look at this one. This is another good example. Look at this one. It's just completely bud blast. We have, oh my gosh. So dead leaves. Oh my gosh, yeah, it's goner. Look, I want to show you guys this. So look at those roots. Those are rotten roots, you can tell, and they're like moldy. Whenever you have mold on an orchid too, that can spread to the other orchids. So that's another thing you want to check for. When you look at the top of the potting medium, you want to see, is there anything white and fuzzy growing, right? You don't want to get anything with mold, because the mold will spread to other orchids too. And like, these are all just really dehydrated. I mean, and there's no examples here I can show you of overwatering, but that's what you would see with overwatering is mushy brown roots if the roots are exposed, versus here, these are all just really dried up. And then over there in the first batch, they were all pretty healthy. All those roots looked pretty good. It was just that one plant that wasn't as good as the rest. So looking at these, I mean, these are all goners. I mean, you can tell from the blooms, like, they're all goners. Yeah, and like, just to show you from this angle, I mean, you can tell. Again, if the blooms look bad, probably not a good sign. If the blooms look good, not always a good sign, but check everything else is kind of the point with that. Yeah, I think that of all of the orchids over here, the one that could be that I would get if I wanted to, this one is the most salvageable right here. And you can even see that it's got a bud opening right there. It's trying to open. It only has the one bud that it lost. It has a lot of healthy looking leaves, versus the rest of these that, you know, again, there's some bud blast there. That one's a complete mess. The rest of these ones, these white fowls, are all diseased and just completely goners. One thing too about all of these orchids is that they're all potted in the same medium, because they're all from the same seller. At like your Trader Joe's, you'll notice different fowls, they'll be potted with different potting media, even if it's the same grower. I think it's just whatever they kind of have on hand. The other thing too is these fowls, every time I see these at Harris Teeter, none of them are ever overwatered, but that is something that you can see. And like at Trader Joe's, you know, they may not know if they do water the orchids when they have them there, they may not know that they have to be drained. They might water them over the crown or underwater. I think here at Harris Teeter, I don't think anybody does anything with these orchids. So I think that they just sit there, and then either they just die of dehydration or somebody buys them beforehand. And the other thing I'll add too, because again, talking about the fact that these have been here longer, the fact that all of them have been fully opened, unless the buds have all died, right? Again, versus like over here, this is the newer batch. I mean, that's very clear, right? And you look over here, where you've got all of these have buds that are not opened and that are healthy. That yellow one is probably the best looking one. These purple ones look pretty good. They don't have nearly as many buds. And the other thing too, when the buds are smaller, so even like that versus like that, when the buds are smaller, again, you have even more longevity. Like they have like these little tiny ones, so you get to watch that really grow. Like that's still in its early stages. So that would be a really good one if you're looking to purchase an orchid. That would be in terms of like the health of the plant, out of all the orchids here, this would be 100% my pick, this yellow one here. My second pick would probably be this one, because again, looking, it's got, those buds are all, they're bigger, but they're, you know, they're not, there's still buds there you get to watch bloom. I just didn't get to examine this one as much. Let me take a look. Yeah, again, you want to look at the crown too, guys, right? You want to look at the crown. Oh my God. Yeah, and you want to make sure there's not any weird discoloration. Now that purple is normal when it's a plant that has purple, right? So like the orchid has purple. So like that purple there, that's normal. What you don't want is like any black. And like, again, that's a really good looking crown right there. But, you know, but yeah, you want to look at the leaves. You want to make sure, like, that one has a lot of leaves. Like, that one actually looks pretty healthy. The blooms could maybe just look kind of mangled because of the way they're situated in the plastic. Like, that one looks really healthy as well. But yeah, hopefully that helps.